This is Jordan Tower with JT News. Make sure you smash that like button, smash that subscribe, and let's get right into the news. Well, Joe Budden turned down a huge Spotify deal, and then his, fellow friends fell out with him. Okay, so there was this. They had one Spotify deal, and they were very successful at it. This really boosted their podcast to another level after Joe Budden left Complex with a show with academics. He took that helped the podcast take off, and then they got a Spotify deal. When they got a deal with Spotify, they were plastered in Times Square, everything. You saw the Joe Budden podcast. Wait, let me see if I can see the billboard. There was a big billboard right here. Joe Budden podcast. So more and more people would know that this podcast is on Spotify. This is when Spotify was trying to get the exclusives from Apple. Okay. There was a podcast war going on. Just like Netflix was once flush with cash. Spotify and Apple were, and they were just handing out deals. Joe Rogan got 100 million. Joe Budden probably got a few million. Maybe he got 2 million to split with his partners because you have operating costs and everything else, just to keep it exclusive. Now, here's where Joe Budden, I would say, made a mistake, and you could argue differently. They supposedly came to him with about $20 million after their contract expired, right? After 2 years. And they were like, all right, we're going to renew, but we want a piece of everything for $20 million. And who knew the terms? It wasn't forever, Probably for another 5 years, 4 or 5 years, right? Exclusively, to give him that much money. And, I don't think they were to be clear, I don't think they were taking a piece of his touring money. That would be separate. And everything's negotiable, right? So say they're giving me $20 million. Okay, yeah, we'll stay exclusively here. But we need some side content to go on Patreon. We'll stick to our schedule. But he could have still done Patreon. This is when they were handing out money like it was candy, just to keep people in. Plus, you're gonna get that extra plug with all their ads and everything. They're gonna run you on billboards, so it's good. But then when he turned that deal down, which was a huge mistake in my part, and I don't care. I know Joe Budden's still making money. I know he's doing well, right? So there were 4 people on the podcast that had to eat at that time. Rory and Mal leave because Joe Budden won't show the contracts. He won't share the numbers. And, these guys are now podcasting almost full time, right? This is their gig. So they're not getting cut in. They don't know what's going on. And they pretty much, these two were there when Joe Budden podcast was nothing. And now it's something at this point. But Joe Budden being Joe Budden would rather lose their friendship than let them see the books and be open, be open with them. So they leave and they start their own podcast. I think they got $5 million each, or maybe they got $5 million to do a podcast with, I forget who they got their deal with. It wasn't XM or Sirius. It was something. They got their deal with somebody. All right. And this was through Katie. KD helped him out with this, Kevin Durant, because he has a media company. And, people don't really check for them anymore, but for a year, it was pretty good for them. Joe Budden had to revamp. He kept going. He was still doing the podcast. He quickly replaced him with his friends Ish and Ice and Ish, right? So it was back to 4 people. Then eventually he added Melissa Ford and then Queen's Flip. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people that got to eat off this podcast, right? It's doing about 7 to 10 million a month on YouTube. So that's about 50 grand. Let's just say that could be more than that. Let's just say playing it, say 50,000. And Flagrant podcast gets, this is Andrew Schultz, makes about 100,000 to 120,000 a month off of his Patreon. Joe Budden became something at Patreon, and he launched this thing. Now, with Andrew Schultz, they tackle all topics and they go everywhere, right? Joe Budden is a hip-hop podcast. Hip-hop supporters notoriously don't support, okay? So I would say let's give Joe Budden half of what Andrew Schultz is making, so $60,000 off that. So Joe Budden's pulling in $110,000 a month, right? But they have a studio that has costs, right? So that's probably, let's just say that's 10 to 15 grand a month, because it's at the top of it's like a penthouse. Let's just say maybe, let's just play it safe, 7,500. Okay. 10,000 with all the bills, right? 10,000, right? Boom. Then you got his two friends. They got to make a certain amount of money, for worth for them to come in. So they're making, let's just say, I don't know, 7,000 each, maybe, right? Queen's Flip, what is he gonna make? 7 to 10 grand, right? 14, 24, 25. Then Melissa Ford's probably got to, make about 7 to 10, right? 7,500 to 10 grand. Let's just say they're each making 10 grand, even with parks, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you got 5 people making, if that's 50,000, then you got the expenses 10 grand. So out of that 110, 120,000, you have heavy expenses every month, heavy. With the podcast deal, they were cool. Rotary Mall, that would have been $20 million, and it would have expired, and you could have still done Patreon. And guess what happened 2 years after? So Academics' deal is expiring, or they're not renewing it. Just last year, you couldn't have predicted this, but it's just, you kind of can, in the sense that things get hot, people pour a bunch of money into it. Gillian Wallow were getting crazy deals with Barstool Sports, Nori, all that stuff's done, right? It's just going to be ads now, right? And supporters. And, Joe Budden's ahead of his time, but you missed a lick. You missed a $20 million lick here. Yeah, he might have had to do another year from now, right? So maybe he had to go to 2024 with his deal, or 2025. But you could have still had the Patreon thing going, right? Because I'm sure you could have worked that out. Maybe took a few million less, did this, right? And it would have kept everything flowing with your current, because I'm going to be honest, where Rotary Mall was a little bit more entertaining to me. But because they had a different vibe going on. And you would have had that 20, because profiting, you might be, even if you were profiting $100,000 a month since then, you're making great money, right? Just shooting high. Say Joe Budden's making $100,000 himself after costs, right? Okay, so yeah, maybe you made $2 million. You could have had $18 million and it would have expired. You could have still been making side money and making an extra 25 grand on Patreon, or 30 grand with extra episodes. I don't know. I think he missed a great opportunity, to be honest with you. But it's his choice to make. I saw him talking about it with Elliot Wilson, and I was just like, wow, it is what it is, man. But anyways, what do you guys think? This is Jordan Tower with JT News. I'll check you guys in the next one. Peace.